seeing fireflies in the summer or like walking on fresh snow. Like I want to have those experiences for people hundreds of years from now.
My name is Nikolai, and I'm a video producer here at Mashable. I wanted to do a video series that looks at how we can create a more sustainable and more equitable future.
To me, that connects you in time from this immediate experience of this pandemic reality to, that post-utopian future where we've done what we need to do.
Eric, thanks so much for coming on the show. It's obviously called The Future We Want, and I can imagine that you have a lot to add because your book is pretty much all about the future that you want with regards to how we mitigate climate change. But before we start, tell me a little bit about the book that you wrote.
The book is called The Future Earth, and in the book, which started as a choose your own adventure book where there were 15 different endings written in the second person to sort of talk about choices that you as the reader might be making over the course of the next 30 years. Finished that version of the book and then realized that the only compelling thing that felt new and interesting and urgent and necessary was that vision of a world where we all did what we needed to do. Because I feel like that is a story that has not really been told enough, or sometimes even at all. I feel like I started in that place with writing this book and realized I had a lot of learning to do to figure out what exactly the path might be to get us there. What would it look like year by year to see that change happen on a transformational scale?
I found this bit in your book, which is towards the end, that I wanted to read out to you. It's 2050, the world is carbon neutral, the economy is circular, society has transformed. Our world is a place that has decided to radically change in its entirety because places like the Marshall Islands matter, because you matter, because we couldn't just go on like we had anymore. I know it's a very big question, but would you be able to try to succinctly line out how we could get there?
So we have now this moment of crisis, and I could sort of see that happening over the last 18 months or so, at least in the climate movement, where we've started to change the narrative away from sort of carbon emissions and graphs and charts towards the general work towards justice. So I have in the book, in the early 2020s, the school strike movement or the climate movement in general will sort of align and attach itself to a broader movement for justice. And that has already happened this year in 2020. So in that sense, I was a little bit slow with it. But I think that once people feel it as urgently as they do civil rights movement or as they do movement for universal basic income or something like that, meeting basic needs today, I think in the 2030s, it will end up being a major conversation about what kind of world are we building, what kind of economy will work for everyone. And this is what Kate Raworth calls a circular economy or a donut economy.
So this double-sided challenge to meet the needs of all within the means of the planet, it invites a new shape of progress. No longer this ever-rising line of growth, but a sweet spot for humanity.
By the 2040s, I think climate science is very clear that temperatures will keep warming, weather will continue to get worse no matter what we do with emissions in the next 20 years. But then we'll have had 20 years of history of work of instituting this transformational change in really every aspect of our lives. I mean, in the book, I have it almost as like a spiritual moment in the 2040s where we realize that we have achieved something unimaginable over the last 20 years, that we have sort of beaten the odds of building a society that is what we all wanted in the first place. This was the hardest part of the book for me to write, was this sort of post-utopia world where we're wondering what it will look like. I don't know, because I don't, there are so many people's voices around the world who have been excluded from this conversation this entire time. Once those voices are included, I have no idea what's going to happen, and I hope it will be good.
I kept thinking a lot because you mentioned your kids in the book, and you have like a double sort of disadvantage in the sense of you're obviously a climate reporter, you're a meteorologist, and you're a parent. So it must be very difficult, looking at the future and like imagining what that is going to be for them when they come of age and when they're supposed to be making their own decisions. And I wonder, does this sense of hope that you prescribe in the book offer any personal sense of resolve for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think that for me, partly the conversation in my head as I was writing was, a conversation with my kids. Like I'm writing it from the perspective of 2050, having a conversation with my kids about what happened and what we were able to do together. So that definitely carried me through. And since that it has to work, it has to be possible. We have to figure it out somehow. We have a 30 or 40 or 50 year lag period factored in here too. So we know that we are doing this work with the knowledge that it's going to keep getting worse no matter what we do. So you have to have a long-term view of your work. You have to be able to think about the sort of immediate tangible joy of, for example, like seeing fireflies in the summer or like walking on fresh snow. Those are things that ground you into, like, I want to have those experiences for people hundreds of years from now. To me, that sort of connects you in time from this immediate experience of this pandemic reality to, that post-utopian future where we've done what we need to do.
In the book, you talk a lot about our propensity for doom and gloom and for humanity's ease with which we create sci-fi, apocalypses, and our propensity for just always imagining the worst. But in your future scenario, you're talking about, skyscrapers built of timber, and you're talking about using old coal mines to sequester carbon and put it back, and you're talking about incredible new technologies and replacing entire city infrastructures that don't work for the people that live them and making them circular and greener and just more fun, essentially, to live in. And I wonder, that's a vision that is particularly appealing to me. And I wanted to ask you, why do you think that vision isn't as prominent in fiction as it should be? Obviously, you're one of the very few people that has been bold enough to even try to imagine something like that at a time where everything seems so dark. But it's a pretty compelling and interesting vision. Like, I wouldn't mind living there tomorrow.
Yeah, thank you. I think that I would like to have this conversation with Hollywood filmmakers too, because I think that people are drawn to conflict. I think that there's something about you can't look away, when there's a disaster happening. But there are ways to imagine conflicts and disasters within this context of utopia as well. There's still going to be climate deniers in this world of 2050 that I have written. So we will continue to try to figure out how to adapt to a warming planet. But then we'll have had 20 years of history of instituting this transformational change in really every aspect of our lives. So my advice to politicians and people who care about the climate is that you just need to pay attention to what the science demands. And figure out a way to do it in an equitable way. I think that's the role of politics, is to figure out how to do it fairly and make sure that everyone's voice is heard in the process, not whether or not to do it.